listener. Welcome back to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream? Today we're going to be talking, mainly about Blood Simple, the Coen brothers' first film from 84.
Yeah.
Won the Grand Jury Prize in 85 at Sundance. And would sort of set the stage for their later works. And we're going to build on the good conversation, I thought, that we had last night. At
Absolutely,
the Fort
Fort Worth Film Club. Yeah. It was a good turnout. It was a good conversation. I really enjoyed the conversation after the film. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and
if you're listening to this and you haven't come out and you're in the Fort Worth area, please come out. We'll be screening again. We'll be screening Terry Gilliam's Brazil on December 21st at the Stage West Theater. I'm excited about seeing that one as well. I've not ever seen that on the big screen. I've never seen it. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I take that back. I might have seen it on the big screen, but I don't think I've ever seen it with a crowd that's going to be as kind of intimate as ours is. So,
do you think they'll be as excited as they were when they saw the Brothers Grimm?
I mean, possibly. I don't know.
Maybe. I do want to say that if you were there at the Fort Worth Film Club screening and you were listening, thank you for coming out and for listening.
Absolutely. And if you stayed after the screening, even more things.
Yep.
That's why we're there.
And that one person that said that one thing.
Yeah, it was
way
awesome.
to go. That
way
was
to
great.
Go. That was so on the nose. I was like, that was so insightful that you said
it
that
unlocked
thing.
so much.
Right. It put a whole different twist on it that we had not thought about before. Yeah. And we won't talk about it tonight, but it's but still. No. But good job. Well done.
And thank you. So before we get into that, we want to talk about some new releases that we've seen and that we have feelings on. So let's talk about The Wonder. Let's talk about Tar, and I think we can save Aftersun for the end because it's just fucking brilliant.
Sure, absolutely.
So
Aftersun after Blood Simple or after the other two?
Aftersun after the other two.
Okay. We'll just intercut it. This is going to be like a Memento type recording where
we're going to start at the end and go backwards, right. Except we'll also play it in reverse. So it'll be a Lynchian kind of experiment. Let's start with The Wonder.
Yeah,
the Florence Pugh vehicle, because I think...
New Pugh. We got new Pugh
new Pugh. We are big Pugh fans on this pod.
If there's anything that you learn about the stars of Why Does the Wilhelm Scream is that we're Pughist. We're Pugh fanatics. Yes. I don't know how to... We'll come up with a term that will...
Pugh-maniacs?
Yeah, there we go. We'll workshop it.
Offline. We'll figure out something. And as Jason has mentioned before on this podcast, that...
She's unconventionally good looking.
Yes, she does not possess the same conventional beauty attributes as someone like Olivia Wilde, who's tall and has striking cheekbones, I think is what we
she's kind of Mantis-like in a way. Not like
Olivia Wilde is Mantis-like, and so also like deadly in that.
Right.
After you consummate the relationship, she will kill you.
She will definitely. Yeah,
not that we know this for sure about Olivia Wilde.
Jason Sudeikis is still alive, right? But I don't know about her first husband, who was some sort of like
billionaire,
right? Yeah,
like royalty or something. So. Okay. So tell us about The Wonder.
Oh Jesus, do I have to do this? Okay.
just a brief.
It's Florence Pugh plays this.
She's a nurse.
Yeah, she's a nurse, but I was trying to figure out the timeline of this. It's like Little House on the Prairie-esque early Americana.
It's really interesting because it's like 1862, and it's in Ireland,
which seems like
and it's after the famine. It's after. But it's after. Okay, so
I seen that. It was 2 weeks ago. I know. I've completely forgotten this bullshit.
So it's like 1862 Ireland. It's sometime after the
all of our listeners are like
the famine.
Why the fuck is he even talking about this? He does not care.
Because it's going to help set us up for our Tar discussion.
We always talk about Pugh.
And yes, we will always talk about Pugh. We should just do like a series on Florence Pugh.
We should.
All right, we're gonna put that in the works.
And half the episode is why is she with Zach Braff? Okay, yes. 1860s post-Ireland famine. There is a girl who is in this remote village, the Banshees of Inisherin. She's in this remote village, and she supposedly hasn't eaten for weeks on end, days on end. And everyone believes it's some sort of divine intervention or some sort of gift from everyone. I say everyone in the town. But there are skeptics, and so they bring in this woman of science, this nurse, to oversee this girl who is supposedly not eating. They also bring in a nun from a Catholic monastery, what nunnery, whatever those are.
Get thee to a nunnery. There's our Shakespeare reference for today.
Right. to also oversee the girl and to oversee Florence Pugh to make sure there's no, nefarious satanic things going on, what have you. And then throughout the time, it's basically Pugh not believing that the girl is not really eating and kind of conversing with this girl, bonding with her and kind of trying to help her figure out her story. And that's really about it. Ultimately, Florence Pugh comes to the realization that the mother actually is feeding the daughter, and they're calling it manna from heaven. So it's not really food, it's manna from heaven. But so Florence Pugh cuts off the access from the mother to the daughter, and the daughter starts to fall into illness and sickness, and she starts to waste away. And she takes this to this board of elders, these men that are wanting to know if this is truly divine intervention or if it is some sort of hokum. And she's saying, look, she's feeding her. This is not this. And they, of course, reject that. The nun has not seen the mother feed the daughter, so she kind of denies Florence Pugh's claims. And so ultimately, Pugh is left with a decision of what she will do in order to save this girl. Are we spoiling the movie? It's only been out.
Oh yeah, fuck that.
It's been on Netflix. If you need, go push pause. Go waste 2 hours.
We have announced on this show. Look, to anyone who has listened, we have announced that we will spoil everything, and if you don't like that. Oh, I shouldn't alienate people. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
True. That's true. If you don't like it, please still listen.
Yes,
I don't know how that works. If you don't like our podcast, please spend 2 hours every couple of weeks listening to it. Yeah. Absolutely. And give us feedback on whydoeswilhelmscream.com and Wesley Brock Kingsley at sometimesbrockissad.com. That's his email address. And he'll reply back to you in really long diatribes about why movies are good or bad or what have you.
And just imagine reading the email in an Eeyore voice because I'm sad.
I think it more of a snuffleupagus, kind of like a hey bird.
Okay, sure. I'm not quite that furry though. Snuffleupagus.
We'll get to the furry men later on in the conversation when we talk about Blood Simple.
Yeah. Well, he is so hairy too.
Hedaya is a hairy man. Yeah. So in addition to the nun and Florence Pugh's nurse, Florence Pugh befriends a journalist who's come to cover this instance of this happening as well, and she kind of befriends him, and he leaks the story and it basically exposes it as a hoax and pisses off the townsfolk as well. She and him become romantically involved. It turns out that Pugh also had she had a child and it died early on in its life, very, very early on. And so she was no longer married at this point. And ultimately, Pugh decides to fake the child's death, and she then she takes the child out of the village with the journalist, and they're living together and they immigrate out of Ireland, and they're living
to Australia.
And they're living together as a family from there just to save her life. That's the story of the movie. The movie is bookended by this our town kind of, or it's where you were brought in to say where it varies. Distinctly says this is a movie. Here's a movie set, which they didn't fucking use in this filming of that movie at all. No. And then at the end, as they go into Australia, then you're brought back into brought back to a movie set. So it's very bookended. And at the beginning of the movie, you're taught. That's the wrong word. The movie asks you to listen to these actors, to believe their stories, which is. We can get into this. I don't want to come off as saying I don't believe women, and this is what this whole fucking movie is all about, right? Is about, a woman who's not believed by a group of men when she's telling them with the facts that are in their face. This is such a poor way to do this. It is so bad. If they had cut the bookends off, the movie would have been
fine.
Not memorable at all,
but fine.
But fine. It would have been a solid 6.
I would have been like, oh, Florence Pugh is really good in that.
Right? Yeah, she's great. So I think the acting is fine. I think the set. The set pieces are fine. The movie would have had a poor imitation of The Witch or I think would have been really interesting. Have you seen Dogville or Mandalay, the Lars von Trier, Nicole Kidman, Bryce Dallas Howard films, where there's no set whatsoever? There's like...
Oh, no.
Oh, they're brilliant. They're brilliant.
He's a blind spot.
Yeah, I get it. Those... I would definitely recommend checking out Dogville. Mandalay is more of a take on slavery in the U.S., but both of them are really good, and they're just so striking because it is, you're watching like an open room, and they're all doing this act. Again, it's our time. There's no set pieces at all.
Right.
So good. I think it would have been very interesting had they had incorporated a little bit more. Like if you had like gone to the edges of these scenes and then still seen the movie set. If they'd pulled back,
they would
and
have
showed
leaned
you,
into it.
Right, yeah. Okay, this idea that this is an artifice that would have been fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
And it really would have added something to it where, I see a cameraman off behind these people, or I see a boom mic, or I see lights, and I see where the horizon ends. Because I don't know what the point of the bookend was outside of just pointing in our faces and saying, women are telling the truth.
So the women telling the truth thing is interesting, but I think they were trying to lean into the idea that stories matter. And look, Nicole Kidman in AMC theaters and the Oscars, every year they tell us that stories matter. I get it. Right? I don't know what the point of sort of like showing the work on this movie was, because it ends up being a film of nothing but binary oppositions. Right? It's science versus religion. It's truth versus fiction. It's man versus woman. It's Irish. It's English. Okay, but then they didn't do anything with that either.
Right. And the story is so conventional.
Yes.
It's a story that this is not a new thing. This is a story that's been told 100 different times in at least 50 different movies. I mean, it's not like it's...
No, and what is it? And I think that there could be... Look, the female body becomes the starving female body becomes a spectacle in this film. And I think that in a way that's problematic, but it could have done something interesting with that. It could have done something interesting about body dysmorphia. What is our relationship with food, right? How do we... And again, these are not new ideas. Not in film, not in art, not in advertising, right? But what about this idea of survivor's guilt? This idea of what conventional religious thinking sort of teaches us to do or pushes us to do, but it does none of that. It just does none of that. And you have this kind of cast of really good character actors who basically just exist in a tableau vivant.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. And these scenes look pretty because Sebastian Lelio is a good director. I mean, he is a visually striking director.
Right. It looks beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I think it would have been better also had they had just shown the bookends and not had the ridiculous stories matter verbiage around it as well.
Sure.
That would have given you thought of like, that would at least allow the audience to interpret what those scenes meant.
Right.
And instead you're like, here's what they are, and here's what you're supposed to think, and here's the beginning of the movie, and enjoy.
Yeah.
And then at the end, remember that thing that we annoyed you with at the beginning of this movie? And you're like, what the fuck was that all about? Oh yeah, here it is again.
Yeah.
I think this movie is so simplistic that most viewers are just going to go, okay, women, I should believe women and women's stories and stories matter, and I'll forget this movie 48 hours after I've watched it.
But I think it's complicated too. That but which woman are we supposed to believe?
True.
Right, because the mother and the little girl who's starving herself are telling one story, when Florence Pugh is telling another story, and the nun is telling another story, and the men are choosing what to believe. And again, I think this could be something interesting, but I think a film like Going Back to the Woman King does a better job of saying, listen to women,
right,
in a much more direct way.
It's also very weird that the journalist is kind of seen as Pugh's savior in this case. It's a very kind of white man, savior complex here. Even if it's a matter of like, he's one of the good ones who believes women, but again, also he's also the guy trying to sleep with Florence Pugh, which no argument there. I get it. We're all Zach Braff in some way.
And I think Tom Burke is. I like Tom Burke a lot. I don't think he has a lot to do in this film. I think the only one who's really good is Florence Pugh. And in a weird way, she's not doing a whole lot of work, but she's just really good at all of it.
And here's the thing, too. We're never going to badmouth Florence Pugh performance. So you might as well, you can take all of what we say about her performances with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I know. She's always going to be amazing. It's just how it goes. So I'm back to this idea of like the bookend thing. And one reason I wanted to bring up that like pointing out the artifice is that I haven't seen that work ever except for Joanna Hogg's The Souvenir Part 2, where at the end of the film, we pull back and see that the whole thing, the entire thing has been the making of this movie that we've just watched.
Right.
And that's a moment where you're like, of course, that's what it was. But it worked at that point because it doesn't show up at any other time.
Souvenir Part 2 and Anguish, those two films, you really...
Oh, yes. Yo, you're right. Yes, okay. Yeah. I forgot about Anguish. It works there, too. I do think it's interesting that Florence Pugh is always eating in this film. And I mean that in a serious way because she stands then in contrast to the girl who's starving. And I thought that was kind of an interesting... again, there wasn't much done with that, but...
Right. There's a ton of angles that could have been taken with this movie, and avenues that they could have gone down that they do nothing with whatsoever. And it's like I said, I think it's one of those movies. It's very easy on its surface just to go, okay, yeah, and because you have this kind of period set piece and people are talking in accents, you have a tendency to go, oh, that was a pretty good movie. If you peel back any of the layers of the onion here,
it just falls apart.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
It's just skin.
And again, I would imagine anybody who's rated this highly, would then, if I asked them to talk about it a month from now, they would have completely forgotten it.
I think you said, what did you say? It was good ideas executed poorly or something like that. And I think that, at least in my mind, leads us into Tar.
All right, yeah, no. I'm going to go ahead and give the synopsis for this one because I have...
Yes, please.
Yeah, so, Cate Blanchett. I mean, what can you say about one of our generation's finest actresses? She plays Lydia Tarr, who is a world-renowned composer. What is the word for that? Conductor.
She's also a composer. She's a composer. She's known as a... And she was like an ethnographic field worker, ethnographic musicologist who had done field research.
Right. She had gone off into, I forget exactly where she'd gone off to do, but she did spend 5 years of work. So we see her at kind of the apex of her career. She is a world famous conductor, as if that's the thing that actually exists. And she's going on this tour. She's about to conduct her, the symphony of her lifetime in Berlin. She's got a book coming out, Tar on Tar, which is a guaranteed bestseller 1,000 times over. And we see her in her process, and this is very much kind of like she is egotistical. She is maniacal in the way that she treats people. She is very self-centered, but it's all undone under the auspices of genius, right? That she is worthy of all of this deflection because she is better than all of us, which I kind of want to go back to that point again.
But she's an EGOT winner.
Oh yeah, that's right. Which is I find funny because doesn't that term only come from the Tina Fey show?
What I thought.
Right, Tracy Morgan. He
wants to be an EGOT. Yeah, he does. Well, he sees the necklace at like a jewelry store. He's like, "What's that?" And then so he has this quest to go to become an EGOT
I find
winner.
that's a thing
because that's my reference for it as well. Every time I hear that, I go back to that show.
And so cracks,
30 Rock.
Thank you. Right. So cracks start appearing in her psyche essentially. We start to see more and more of her, the ugly side of her character. She confronts a young girl who's been bullying her daughter. She starts to hear things at night, and she starts to have really bad nightmares. And about halfway through this 2-hour and 40-minute movie, you find out that one of her previous students, so you see her actually teaching a class at Juilliard, and she's treating this pansexual person who is also wanting to be a conductor. She's treating his concerns about, white cisgendered composers and their bad deeds where he can't really get into the work because he can't get past their the moral stance and she kind of belittles that. Like I said, she confronts a bully at her at her daughter's school. Comes to find out that one of the students that she had been teaching at this accordion academy has killed herself. She's basically, Lydia Tarr has basically blacklisted her from all, from all symphonies, basically everywhere. She can't find a seat on any symphony. And ultimately, she can't meet with, Lydia's decided not to meet with her anymore, and she ends up killing herself. And then from there, a bunch of other things start to come out where she's probably sexually groomed young women in other symphonies, and essentially videos start coming out. The word that gets out about the girl who kills herself, and her career starts to nosedive, as does she. At a certain point, she is living in this apartment in Berlin. There's a woman that lives across the street that's a older woman that lives with her even older mother, and she's constantly bothering her in the middle of the night, or at least when she's trying to practice music. She decides to groom another young woman on her symphony, the Berlin Symphony. She's going to get her a spot. And ultimately, that woman just uses her to get into the symphony and to get first chair or to get the solo act, and then kind of ignores her. And ultimately, once all these videos start to come out and everyone starts to turn against her, she's lost her family, she's lost her seat in the Berlin Symphony, she's lost her financial backer, who, at the culmination of the big event that she was supposed to conduct, she rushes the stage and beats Mark Strong about the head and face in a very kind of compelling, or not compelling, in a very like wild scene. And then ultimately we see her post this event. She goes overseas. She goes to Asia. I'm guessing, is it Vietnam that she's some Asian country that she's going to, and she's reduced to conducting a concert,
like a live score.
A live score for Monster Hunter, a video game music, and then we cut to black, and that's basically it. You pull back across the crowd, and it's what's supposed to be a humiliating moment for Lydia, and where she's in a room full of cosplayers, not serious music people, but they're people that are just there to listen to a score of a video game that now that she's been reduced to, and that's essentially the film. I mean, there's other bits and pieces in there that we've obviously in a 2 hour and 40 minute. We don't have that much time on this podcast, so we can't go over everything.
No. But I do want to hit. So I want to talk about the ending, and I want to talk about the moment with the conducting student whose name is Max, who identifies as a BIPOC pangender person.
Yeah, I may have said it wrong.
No. I was just reiterating.
No, I don't. But I don't want to be disrespectful to Max, to a fictional character either. But
right.
And he's very nervous in that scene. His leg is jittering. I mean, he's obviously taken aback and in awe of this person who is at the top of the field that he wants to be in, but also trying to find his own agency and his own voice to speak up for something that's obviously means something to him. And that Lydia, essentially, I'm not saying that she doesn't necessarily have points to make to back to,
because she does, and I think that this is where I get so confused with this movie. So I'm so confused on what this movie is actually trying. Like, am I supposed to take this as parody and satire, or am I supposed to take this as a serious comment from Fields and even Blanchett about cancel culture? And are they lampooning, in a way, identity politics? Are they sort of poo-pooing cancel culture? I can't tell. I really can't tell. And it drives me insane, because the movie opens, and I think this is really interesting. The movie opens with the credits. Right. So the credits that would typically be at the end of the film are
and
first,
they run in reverse.
Sorry. So
I couldn't say it right. So they run in reverse. So as you were trying to say it, I'm just going to go mumble over it.
They run in
That's
reverse.
how good this podcast is, guys.
Look, we try. And frankly, that's all anybody can ever ask for.
That should be the subtitle of our podcast. Why does the Wilhelm scream?
We try. So the credits run in reverse, starting with like the lowest kind of person and going and finishing with the director, as a way, I think, of saying, look at all the people you never thought of that it takes to make this thing. Right? To make this thing that you just paid for to sit in and watch. It takes a lot of labor. And this I think is part of what the movie is doing, is saying, look at all these people that hold up this person of genius, this person that we hold up as genius. Look at all these enablers. And Adam Gopnik is a clown. The New Yorker is a grandized mediocrity. And I used to read the New Yorker for years, but I think Adam Gopnik's is self-important. I mean, and look, who the fuck am I to talk about Adam Gopnik? But regardless, right? I have opinions and I have a microphone, so fuck it. But
have you ever seen I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Have you ever seen The Good Place? It's one of the sections in The Good Place where one of the sections of hell is this guy's in a room and
Adam Gopnik.
And issues of the New Yorker just keep piling up in the corner, and Ted Danson's response is, "Come on, you know I'm never going to read those."
that's yes. But it's so true. It's so true. So it's like, is this film sort of shining a light on these kinds of celebrities, or the people that enable them, or both?
So what was the New Yorker piece? I'm sorry, if I may have.
The after the credits, right? After the credits and after the weird social media video of her on the plane,
right? Which really is. It comes back, but it doesn't
make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I don't understand. Yeah, but then we cut to Lydia Tarr at the New Yorker Festival, and so Adam Gopnik is there hosting, and so this now I can use this Nathan Lee quote. The critic Nathan Lee said that Tarr is Memoria for people who think the New Yorker is super important.
Yeah, no, I think that.
I think that is
because I did got Memoria vibes when I was
with the sound, like you just said, the sound and the sort of nightmares.
Right.
And
I really liked, not to divert, but I really liked In the Bedroom. I really, really liked Little Children. I thought that was just a really good adaptation of a Tom Perrotta book. But like you said, this film almost demands multiple viewings, and I'm not sure I can go back and watch it again.
No.
The scene with the mother who's dying was so disturbing and so kind of out of left field. What was that trying to tell us? So there's a scene, like I said, she's living in this apartment in Berlin, and she's got this really kind of almost what you would consider mentally challenged or mentally disturbed neighbor who's looking after her mother. And she keeps coming by and saying, my mom's paper was stolen, and she keeps banging on the door. Well, one time she comes over in a panic in the middle of the night and her mom has fallen out of her chair. They go over to her apartment and her mom is naked, wrapped in a bandage, who looks like she's got bed sores.
She had fallen off of the toilet.
And so or it's waste that's on her. And just to that scene, so once Lydia Tarr gets back into her apartment, she strips down naked and then she starts to wash herself off. I just don't know, that was so I don't know what that scene was. Again, out of this movie, you're right. I don't know what this movie is trying to tell us. Is it trying to shine a light on that we will allow people of power to get away with these atrocities because
up to a point, but then up to a point, that's it, that's enough.
Right.
But I'm not really sure, and this is I'm not lessening the accused atrocities. I'm not really sure what the atrocities are in this film.
Right, because the first thing that she does, again, that she's a hard-ass teacher, and that she has opinions on the morality of men who lived eons ago.
Right. Because that's an interesting conversation, or could be an interesting conversation.
Right, absolutely. But they do nothing with that.
No.
And so other than they take her words in a recorded video and manipulate it. So you're seen as, okay, well, she clearly didn't say any of the things and didn't behave in the ways. She was abusive and certainly not, she wasn't providing any sort of guidance, and she was dismissive.
But she's a bad teacher.
Right, yeah. Sure. But is that her worst crime? Does that require her to be, to the extent of, again, the suicide? Yes, she blackballed her, but there was, she also did say that the woman was disturbed.
Right. And if it's a case of emotional abuse and bullying to an extreme, okay, I'm not arguing that, and I'm not saying people need to be tougher, but we don't get any of that in the film. We see her how she acts with her assistant, who I think Naomi Merlant. I think she's really good. We see her not give her the job she wants, and then that sort of leads to the downfall.
This is the Devil Wears Prada. This is exactly this movie.
Yes. This is not new ideas, and that's. Again, the other part of it, because the new stuff would have been the conversation with Max, right? The BIPOC pangender student, and where he's like, I can't take Bach seriously because he's a misogynist. And it's like, okay, I don't know enough about Bach's misogyny to go, was he just an asshole and a bad husband, or was he something worse? But again, like, I don't know. And I'm not one, look, I'm not this like separate the art from the artist, because if you're a bad person, I'm going to look at your art as kind of bad anyway. So I'm not defending that, but I think that conversation could have been so much more exploratory and richer.
And she had a really good point too. I mean, where the people that he did like, also were just as bad, if not as, bad, if not just as bad as Bach was.
Yeah.
So that and encapsulated would have been a very interesting place to take all of this. But at this point, we're left with, really, what did she do? She was shitty to a girl that was bullying her daughter. And that seems to be like, none of the things that she had done where aside from being a narcissist, that seems to be her biggest crime. And also to be somewhat abusive. So the message here of power corrupts and money corrupts. Again, that's really okay. And then are we supposed to, the last scene is supposed to be a scene of ridicule. We're supposed to look down. So that's why it's so difficult to figure out where this film is coming from. Because again, none of her transgressions, to your point, is this a parody? Because none of her transgressions really seem to warrant.
And if they do, they don't show us. They don't give us enough information to make us go, yeah, okay, I see how that's like.
Aside from the breakdown, when she's lost everything, she's lost her family.
That's just batshit stupid.
And she loses. Right.
Sorry.
Right. No, because it wouldn't. You see her when the mother dies in the apartment, and they try to sell it, and the people come over, and the relatives come over, and they basically ask her to stop playing music.
That was kind of funny.
It was funny. It was, and she starts playing this song on the accordion about apartment for sale. You're burning in hell. You put your daughter in jail.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but but the sort of like, no, I'm not going to be quiet. Right. That was kind of funny.
And so again, like that's supposed to embody, or at least to show you her continual mental decline. By the time we get to her in the Asian country where she's doing this, she seems to have all of her faculties. Yes, she's reduced, but she's got all of her faculties around here again.
But it also like seems to be saying, okay, this is how you like descend in this version of the art world. You start at the Berlin Philharmonic, right? You're at the tops. Well, then you go back to New York to meet with your like agents and marketing people. That's a step down. Then you go back to whatever hometown it was that you grew up in Omaha or Cleveland. That's a step down. And then the last step, the last descent into your personal hell is some foreign country. The critic Amy Talbot, I don't know, she was on a she was on a podcast, and she just went off on this, and she called it the most racist bullshit she's ever seen. And it was, she hated it.
It's a point.
But it isn't. I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, it's not racist." Well, I mean, look, movies are interpretation machines, and I'll say this again, I'm sure, but that is a way to look at it, because you're saying she's been so reduced that she has to go to a foreign country with a bunch of others to do this work.
But the others then are accepting of all of this bad. Like, they wouldn't be, like, they're so stupid and they're so disconnected that they wouldn't have been able to pick up on this as well.
Those aren't Jason's actual thoughts. Those are the thoughts of the movie that Jason is sort of like
when Brock re-edits this, like in the movie, and puts my words together, that's what my thoughts will be. But it will appear to be anyway. Yeah. So when I'm canceled, you'll know that you'll be able to come back to this episode and say, wait a minute, let's put all this in context.
It just, why did you have to do that?
And also, to that end, like, you don't need, now granted, she's done popular music because she's an EGOT. You don't need Lydia Tarr to conduct, and it doesn't add any sort of prestige to conduct Monster Hunter, live shows. Yeah. You can do that with anyone. So why would none of that make sense? Now, all of it was to really set up this scene where she's having tension. She goes to her hotel concierge, which is, now obviously all of this is shown as, like, this is shown as like Vietnam era, 1970s, what we would think of, basically really, really third world accommodations. She's not in some
It's
big,
really
huge
reductive.
city. It's really, really bizarre.
And stereotypical.
Yeah, because like, what city is she in where she's staying in a hotel that's, none of it makes any sense whatsoever.
No.
And so she goes to a massage parlor, which is actually in a nice building. And the massage parlor is one where she goes and gets to pick her masseuse, and of course, when she goes, all of the masseuses,
It's like vinyl, right? It's just the same.
Right.
The plural of masseuse
are arranged like an orchestra would be arranged, and she picks out the woman in the same position of the woman that she was enamored with, that kind of rejected her advances, and then that's the only person that's looking at her, and she runs outside and throws up in the street as this sort of like revelation that she
is a bad person.
That the monster that she truly is because one Asian masseuse is looking at her in the eye and happens to be in the same position. This is a realization of, oh my God, it's not the fact that one of her students killed herself after repeated emails.
Well,
that were
she was
sent.
damaged anyway.
Right. It was the realization that the woman that she was trying to groom and use for sex, and obviously offer up, a seat on the symphony. That was what really kind of.
I also want to say
made the connection. I
don't buy for 1 second that she can seduce these women. I don't buy for 1 second that she's charming enough.
I think it's the power thing.
I get it, but if you look, I get that, right? But if you look at the way Naomi Merlant looks at her, it's like she's scared of her all the time, and she hints at these like past kind of romantic sexual relationships. I'm like, but there's just, I understand that power is sexy, right? I get that sex is itself about power and everything else, right, is about sex. Fine. But there's just nothing like there. And like even the only good part about this movie is Nina Haas. She is so good. And if you're a Christian Petzold fan like I am, you're just like, ooh, Nina Haas. But I don't buy it. I don't buy her character for the most part. And again, that's why I'm like, is this kind of a parody? Is this a satire?
Yeah, and one would lend itself to that because her conducting is overblown and overdramatic, and Mark Strong has hair. So there's all these kind of things that would indicate that you're not supposed to be taking this seriously.
None of it fits right. I don't know. I think I could berate this film all day. I don't understand why everyone loves it so much. I think it's been divisive.
Come on.
But it really?
No, I think everyone likes it because you're supposed to like it. Because it has all the pedigree of an art house film. And we're back. Yeah, of course it is.
But it's not real. All it is like classical music. And that's like high art. And so that makes it an art house film.
But it's somewhat inscrutable, so you think that it's more intelligent than it actually is. It's overlong. It's got prestige actors in it. They all seemingly take it seriously.
Yeah. I actually wrote down, this film thinks it's saying something so heavy and it's not. It's a familiar story set in this quote-unquote exotic world of classical music.
It's you remember when James Ivory pictures were popular and like every like
no, you're older than me.
That's true. I am older than you. But for every like Martin Scorsese's Age of Innocence, we would get, some reductive take of Sense and Sensibility or some sort of Jane Austen horse shit it's and people tend to gravitate towards things that are different. It bears all the markings of a prestige art house film, and yeah, I don't think it holds up.
No.
But I think it's inscrutable enough where people will think, well, I didn't get it, and so I'm not smart enough to figure it out. So it's got to be a good movie.
Which is what I kept thinking. And I'm like, I should watch this again. And I'm like, I'm not going to watch this again.
No.
So the more and more I thought about it, actually the angrier I got about the film.
It takes so long. And again, I'm not against long movies, but it takes so long. You're an hour and 20 minutes in before anything starts to unravel, and then you realize you've got another hour and 20 minutes to go, and like nothing, like I said, everything is so inconsequential. And not that everything has to be like in your face, like I just complained about with The Wonder, where it isn't, but the social commentary that Field had with little children. Now, granted, a lot of that could have come from the novel as well, but was so well done, and in contrast to this, it's just clumsy. And again, it's almost like he kind of like had very silly ideas of like, oh, I'm going to show the gaffers before the director, and the guy who worked on this some of the sound design. but yeah, everything else kind of, again, the social media, phone recordings kind of pull you out. Like you said, this message is so muddled. Is it, we live in this society that everyone's being recorded and everything can be manipulated, and so we need to be aware of what the actual truth is and who we demonize. But again, she's shown as but focusing on her, you clearly want to say that she was. Are you saying she was unjustly done, or where are you? And again, I know we keep going to say we're saying the same thing over again. But is he trying? Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know. You're spot on in the fact that I don't know what he's trying to say. Is she unjustly humiliated by the end of this movie? Because I think what he's trying to say is that she deserves what she gets. I think on the surface of this is that, because again, the credits would speak to that, right?
Right.
The little people matter.
Right. You can't step on these people that prop you up.
Right. Right. And the people that you stepped on to get to where you are still matter. So if you're still treating those people like shit. But her transgressions, I don't know. Would this work better if she was more of a Miranda Priest? I mean, like.
But you know who she is. And this isn't my thought. I forget where I heard this, so this isn't my original idea. She's the female Daniel Plainview from This Will Be Blood. That's who she is. She has ego and genius, and they clash. And this is great. This is interesting. On the surface, she's an interesting character. But again, am I supposed to?
That disappoints me then, because the Daniel Plainview. I mean, obviously, we've spoken about this. That movie's brilliant, but the Daniel Plainview piece of it, again, he was. He was a victim of his own hubris. I mean, he caused his own downfall in this case. It wasn't, and he isolated himself on purpose because he thought everyone else was. That would have been a brilliant fucking movie. Where if she'd have just said "fuck you" and
gone off to this other country
showing
and
her
done
emotionally vulnerable and really trying to be taken aback. Like, she should have not given a shit about this girl that committed suicide.
I think she just had this nervous breakdown because she was losing her power and her place of prestige.
But not at that point. She hadn't. I mean, at that point, she still. That was the very beginning of we're supposed to see this as crazy because and how horrible she is because look at all those emails that she sent out.
Right, yeah.
No, Daniel Plainview would have done that and stood up. I mean, and then she would have gone on some fucking talk show and double down on all of it. And then, or also, she would have apologized and then also doubled down. Yeah. She would have said, it's a terrible thing that happened and I feel bad for her family, but I can't be held responsible. That's, if I find one beautiful conductor in the world and it takes 15 people to kill themselves, you're welcome. Fuck you. You're welcome.
That would have been a much better movie.
My God, it would have been a much better movie.
Well, you guys should see. He is so worked up right now. I know this is an audio format, but man.
I'm gesticulating wildly.
That's a perfect place to end, I think, our Tár discussion. Look, I want to get to Blood Simple, but I just want to say that Aftersun is brilliant.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Charlotte Wells' debut feature film. It's brilliant. Paul Mescal and oh my God, I can't remember the girl's name, but she is fantastic. It would really behoove you to seek out Charlotte Wells's short film Tuesday, which this is kind of the precursor for. It's so good. It's on Vimeo.
Give me a rundown of what it's all about.
Really interesting. So
that's not an easy thing to say.
I know. So this is it's the
even
story.
On its surface, it's fine,
it's the story of a young father and his preteen daughter that go on a holiday to Turkey, to a kind of resort in Turkey. It's set in the 90s, and it's their kind of last trip together. Paul Mescal's character, the father, is separated from his daughter's mother. They still keep in touch. They're still on good terms, but it's on this trip, and you can see that there is something under the surface going on with this guy. He's kind of sad, or he has these moments of sadness. He is working really hard on meditation and Tai Chi and this kind of focus, and there are books kind of on the dresser addressing this stuff. But it's a father-daughter film.
And it's a coming-of-age story as well.
It's a coming-of-age story, and it's told from her point of view. I think she's 11 in the film. And it's told really from her point of view. There's also this really great use of the video camera and how it almost works as it does work as a double present tense. We see things being shot through the video camera and then back to that same present moment. We see them separated in rooms. We see them shot through mirrors. There's always this kind of disconnect, right? There's always this kind of distance between these two characters. It's beautiful. It's heartbreaking. It is. I think it's incredibly shot. I I think her storytelling, her narrative technique is really interesting and really compelling.
Yeah. The girl's brilliant. I mean, well. I mean, she's so good. I don't remember her name either, but which is doing her a disservice. But yeah, she's so. I will say, the only thing that I don't think a lot of they're so good that I don't that the other like surrounding characters.
Frankie Corio.
Aren't quite as good, some of the other kid actors are a little bit distracting, but I think that's just a nature of a first film and budgetary reasons and things like that.
Well, she got money from New York and Scotland. She's Scottish, I believe, by birth, but went to NYU, and so she was able to kind of do I think both kind of both sources of funding. And
nice.
So, but other than that, it doesn't look like a first film. It's really polished.
I don't think,
and it's really slick in a good way. I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right.
And I like the inclusion of adult Sophie. That's the character's name. And how she remembers him, how she sees her father in this dream, right, of him dancing in the club, sort of like free. And that's then like the last image we're left with in the film too. I really like that. It was great. It was fantastic. I want to watch it again, but it's going to destroy me. So
I think it's available for streaming now at this point. So,
is it? Yeah. So I'll watch it and cry at home. Okay. Should we move on to Blood Simple?
Let's do it.
Okay.
What I know about is Texas. Down here, you're on your own.
Hello.
Having a good time?
Hey, what's it?
Your husband.
I got a job for you. It's not strictly legal.
You want me to kill him?
Ray, let's get out of here.
Blood Simple, Coen Brothers' first film, 1984. A bit on the Coens, and I'll let you sort of sum up the movie.
Sure.
But we had so at this point, before this, the brothers didn't have a whole lot of experience. Joel did an undergrad at NYU Film School, and then started at UT, University of Texas.
Correct. Yeah, he followed a woman out there, I think his wife at the time,
as we all do.
Yeah,
and then he left and was working on sort of like industry movies and commercials, music videos.
He was doing a lot of post-production work on things like on Evil Dead.
Yeah, well,
that's how genre films.
That's how he got Raimi's attention. Was that he showed this real kind of penchant for editing, and so then he became an assistant editor on Evil Dead. And so then after that, he and his brother Ethan wrote this. Did you know Ethan has a philosophy degree from Princeton?
No,
he did his thesis on Wittgenstein's later work.
Oh, nice.
Wittgenstein being the kind of greatest philosopher ever, because we don't talk about Kant because of his misgivings and his basic racism, right? But so this was like the first thing that they did together. Of course, after that they did some other stuff with Raimi.
Right.
I think this, and we'll talk about this I think later too, but it sets up a whole lot of what we now come to associate with them. That kind of homage to certain genre films, dark humor situated around like these bleaker scenarios, plot twists on top of plot twists, on top of a fairly simple plot.
Yeah, I mean, and it really kind of an efficiency of their just of their methodology in their filmmaking in the sense that they had $1.5 million to make this movie, and really all of it is there is evident. I mean, you can see where they didn't have 1.6. I mean, it's just a matter of they did what they needed to do. They knew what their money situation was and wrote the script to that, rather than starting off with some grandiose design and then having to scale it back because they couldn't afford it. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They knew to the point of who they wanted to get and were able to get them, which, in Emmett Walsh, which I, always serendipitous that these things work out. I think Hedaya is such a great character actor. You probably could have gotten him without really much. McDormand's a find, right? But I think Emmett Walsh really, if you don't have that character right, and I'm not saying that no one else could have done it, but I think he understood this script in ways that I'm not sure other actors would have, and he brings something so sinister and so delicious to this role, and just wears that kind of smarmy, just sweaty ugliness of 1980s Texas, really, right? This kind of like just garish,
the yellow kind of like corduroy suit that he wears. It's so good.
It's so good.
Barry Sonnenfeld was the cinematographer, pretty much fresh out of school.
Yeah.
The thing that he had done, do you know what he did right before this?
No.
He shot the video Rock the Casbah for The Clash, which was filmed in Austin.
Really?
Yeah, it was filmed in Austin. The Clash are playing in front of like a live oil rig. The video shows a Hasidic Jewish limo driver picking up a Muslim hitchhiker.
Wow.
And they go to a rock concert. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it. You should watch this video.
I'm sure I have.
It's bizarre. It's brilliant. I mean, the Clash are great because the Clash wrote this song. Here's your Clash background, listeners. The Clash wrote this song in response to the Ayatollah in Iran after the revolution, sort of banning all music. And so the song is about the citizenry and even the Air Force rejecting that, right, and playing this music. So
and Sonnenfeld would go on to direct Men in Black and
Get Shorty.
Yes.
And Addams Family, Value, Men in Black 3. And he did the first 3 Coen brothers films. So he did this, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing. And that was, and then that one guy who's like really famous took over.
Talk about a first 3. Well, we can keep talking about this, but like a first 3 movies coming out of the block. That's a murderer's row right there.
It's so good,
like,
right?
And subsequent. I mean, like getting leaps and bounds better each time. Although you could make an argument for Miller's Crossing and Raising Arizona, which one's better. But in reality, I mean, like, again, they're so good. So we go back.
Yeah, I love Miller's Crossing. I think it's mine.
Yeah, that may be one of my favorite.
Yeah,
I mean, at least of the early stuff. So we are in this small Texas town, and it's kind of a nondescript. You get a voiceover from Emmett Walsh, basically saying every man in Texas is on his own, essentially, which kind of sets up the whole tone for this movie.
We live in Texas, and it's true.
Dan Hedaya is. Yeah, Brock and I aren't even in the same room. This is
no. We're all just isolated down here.
So Dan Hedaya is a greasy bar owner. It's this kind of out of the way. It's advertised by a big bull sign out front, and it seems like it's not a traditional strip club. I think girls dance on the bar occasionally, so it just seems like a real seedy place to be.
Like a seedy go-go bar kind of?
Yeah, it's full of lowlifes. It's full of neon. And he's one of those guys he has money, but this is how he intends to spend it, and this is the business that he has. So like you're given the idea that he either has some sort of additional form of income, and he's now just living out of this bar and kind of where he's making his life. The beginning of this film starts, and he's meeting with Emmett Walsh about an affair that his young wife, Frances McDormand, is having with her boyfriend, who also is a bartender at the bar where...
He's decidedly not a marriage counselor, though.
This is true. And Emmett Walsh is basically confirming Hedaya's suspicions that his wife is actually having an affair with him. And Hedaya realizes that he can't live with this. He can't, and so he hires Emmett Walsh to kill his wife and her lover. Emmett Walsh decides to do it for $10,000 in one of the best lines of the movie, where Dan Hedaya and Emmett Walsh meet up in Emmett Walsh's VW Bug, and Hedaya's like, "I've got a job for you," and he's like, "Well, if it's legal and the money's right, I'll do it." And Hedaya turns to him and is like, "Well, it ain't exactly legal," and Emmett Walsh takes a pause and he's like, "Well, if the money's right." It's so delicious and so good.
But again, like, this is what, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is what the Coens, this sets the groundwork for stuff that shows up later in these films. This kind of very sort of dry but funny delivery of these. Look, they're funny lines, but they're also brilliant lines.
Yeah, you could see this being in a 1940s noir, being a straight-laced line that someone would say to another, to a gangster.
And it says so much about character, too. It says so much about Emmett Walsh's character, this private detective that will, he'll tell you he has morals and standards, but when it comes down to it, he doesn't. He'll pretty much do anything for the right amount of money.
And so Emmett Walsh agrees to kill both of them for $10,000. He actually takes the $10,000 and decides not to kill them, but he but he copies up these. He does some 1980s photoshopping
in the dark room
and provides photographic evidence, quote unquote evidence, to Dan Hedaya that he's killed him. And then while he was taking the photos of Frances McDormand and John Getz, and they were sleeping in the same bed, he steals Frances McDormand's snub-nosed, pearl-handled revolver and shoots Dan Hedaya in the chest, takes the money, and leaves. And John Getz goes back. John Getz is Frances McDormand's lover. Remind me, is his name Ray?
Ray.
Okay, so his name is Ray. So Ray goes back to the bar because Marty owes him 2 weeks back, and Marty's Dan Hedaya's character. Marty owes him 2 weeks of back pay. He's going to quit. They basically come to an agreement that, hey, I'm sleeping with your wife, and it's like, whatever, dude, I'm like, and so Marty
can't work here anymore.
Right, you can't work here. You can't bartend at my bar and sleep with my wife. It seems like a fair rule, right?
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
And so. But Marty doesn't want to pay Ray. Ray goes back and finds the snub-nosed revolver and Dan Hedaya shot and thinks, oh shit, the woman that I'm sleeping with, the person that I'm supposed to be in love with, has killed her husband. So as any noble lover would do, he takes Dan Hedaya's body, puts him in his car, and decides to go out and bury him in a field, in a I don't know if it's not a cornfield, it's just a
like a plowed.
Yeah, it's a plowed field with nothing that's on it at the moment. So while he's driving Dan Hedaya's supposedly dead body out to the field to bury him, Dan Hedaya wakes up and starts to crawl away from the car that's been stopped on the side of the road because now he's stopped and he's freaked out about the alive body in his car. Ray gets a shovel out of his trunk and is about to go and beat Hedaya over the head. A semi-truck, but he's having a crisis of conscience during this whole time. A semi-truck comes by, puts him back in the car, and then drives him out into the middle of the field and then buries him alive. All this while, Frances McDormand then finds out that Ray has, because obviously she didn't know Marty was in trouble or even had a private detective, that Ray has the sense, she thinks that Ray has killed Marty and that he's going to do the same to her. And obviously Ray thinks that Frances McDormand has killed Marty. And what's her character's name? Is it
Abby?
Abby, yes, thank you. And so they're both distrusting of one another. All the while, M. Emmett Walsh's character, Lauren, which you don't actually see, you don't ever hear his name, it's just written on his lighter.
He's got a Zippo, a silver Zippo. It's on the side of it says Elk Lodge Man of the Year, like 1978 or something. It's so perfect, right? His name is written on with like a lariat. It's so good.
Lauren realizes that he left his Zippo lighter back at the bar, goes back to get it, also realizes that while he's looking through his photos that he's burning to give him evidence that he was even involved with any of these people, he realizes that Marty has kept one of the photos and put it in his safe. So Lauren goes back to the bar to retrieve his lighter and also break into the safe and to get the last photo so that he's no longer involved. While he's there, Abby goes back to the bar. He thinks that Abby's seen him. And so as Ray and Abby are plotting their escape, because now Abby thinks that Ray has killed Marty, and Marty's basically still thinks that Abby had killed Marty to begin with. Now he knows that he actually killed him because he was alive when he buried him. They're planning their escape.
But he thinks he did it for her, right? He thinks that he buried him alive for her.
And now M. Emmett Walsh thinks that they both know that he was involved and killed Marty. So now he has to go and kill them. He sets up shop on top of a building across from Ray and Abby's loft that they've kind of moved into, and he shoots Ray through the window. Abby smartly turns off the light.
Finally.
And so Lauren goes over to the building to kill Abby. Abby's able to take a knife and stab him. She's able to trick him, lure him into a bathroom, take a knife and stick his hand through a window that's somehow outside of a building between two windows. It's very complicated. I apologize, I'm not doing it justice while I'm describing it.
We get the idea that on the Abby runs into the bathroom to hide, and she opens the bathroom window and looks out, trying to find a way to escape. And she looks to the left and realizes that, at least this is kind of what we assume, that she can open the window to the next door unit and sort of get over and then get in there and hide. And so that's what Lauren is trying to do is open that window. And as he opens the window and puts his hand down on the sill, then she stabs through it with Ray's knife.
So Lauren is stuck. He's in the bathroom of one unit with his hand stuck in the bathroom of another unit, and he takes his gun and starts to shoot holes in the wall. One, you think trying to kill Abby potentially in the crossfire, but also once the gun is spent, he starts punching his way through the wall so that he can grab the knife and pull his hand out. He does that, and ultimately Abby's able to use the last bullet in her revolver to shoot through the bathroom wall, and she clips Warren in the stomach, and he falls under the sink. And one of the greater lines of the movie too, where she's like, I forget exactly how she says something about Marty.
So I think she is sort of still under the assumption that Marty is somehow alive.
Okay.
So she has that vision or the dream of him being there. She doesn't, because she goes to the other bartender, Maurice. She says, I think Marty's dead. And he's like, Marty's not dead. I just talked to him. It's fine. And so she has this assumption, or she has this idea that it's Marty doing all this. And so as she shoots Walsh through the door, she says, I'm not afraid of you, Marty.
Right. And then Walsh goes, well, if I see him where I end up, I'll tell him. And he's like laughing as he's dying. Another great intimate Walsh scene where he's just like starts to laugh out loud because he knows he's cooked. He's done for. And he's like, you know what? If I see him, I'll tell him.
If I see him, I'll tell him. And that's it.
That's the end of the movie. Yeah, what I love about the Coens is that even at this stage in their career, they're such students of the genre. I mean, of these genres and of film, and like, because this does just speak to 1950s, 1960s noir films, and like all these double cross, double indemnity, all these types of movies that came before it and spoke the same language, and they do it. Look, this movie is rough. It is raw. There's scenes that just shutter shot out of like
it's got some weird
not
cuts.
Smooth transitions. Yeah, it's not the most polished film you'll ever see out of a first time filmmaker or filmmakers. But as far as its substance goes, it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, it is a clear announcement of their intention. And I said this last night at the Fort Worth Film Club discussion, but this is a very postmodern film. And I mean that in not a, look how smart I am, I just call things postmodern. But I think it quite purposefully references those film noir films. And the other part of that is, again, the use of the four tops. It's the same old song, which is played 3 times during the film. And it's them saying, it's just a rehash. It's just a reinterpretation, our representation of film noir. I mean, the song, it's just the same old song, was actually a reworking of I Can't Help Myself, right? And fairly acknowledged by these guys. I mean, so it's a kind of meta commentary on both parts. But again, it's showing how smart they are in what they're doing. And it's using all of these elements. I mean, I think this is brilliant to take a genre and go, okay, we're going to work within this structure. We don't have a ton of money, but here's what we can do. We can do shadows, right? We can do really kind of like severe camera angles. We can do this like very minimal plot and just have twists and turns, and we can do our own spin on a femme fatale. Yeah, I think it's a brilliant way to do that. And so I mean postmodern in a kind of complimentary way.
And it does, it does a lot of that without being, again, still understanding its limitations, because Frances McDormand is not your typical femme fatale. But they also realize that she was probably the best actress for the job and so she's so good in it. She's so believable. She has such a unwashed innocence about her that you understand that why Ray and Marty would be broken up over her, and also be still like suspicious of her in a way where they realize her, we know we use agency a lot on here, but her intelligence and her, even if she is kind of wide-eyed and unworldly, she still has this a presence about her where she's carrying herself with some sort of level. And of course, obviously, I think where Ray is coming to it from is that she is a woman of prominence and wealth. And where Marty is coming into it is she's a person of youth, and
she's arm candy,
right,
for him, right. I mean, she is a trophy wife to him.
From a guy who no longer can even with his money can no longer procure women to even look at him or pay attention to him.
And there's a great scene in that where he tells this woman at the bar that he owns, he's trying to hustle her, as she says. Right? He's like, tell Maurice, you've got a headache, you're gonna hang out with me. And she's like, no, get out of here. What are you doing? But he's so sleazy and creepy in that scene. He's great. The Frances McDormand femme fatale thing, I think this is actually brilliant by them. I think it's them saying, she doesn't look like your typical femme fatale. And I think we always think of Lana Turner, I mean, as an example of a femme fatale, this like blonde bombshell who also has something kind of sinister in her eyes. And that makes her even, and I'm sorry for this, makes her even hotter. That kind of look of like, oh, there's trouble. Like we all love trouble. But I think this is what makes that, or helps subvert that, is that she does look so young and so sort of quote unquote unworldly, but there's still something magnetic about her, and there's something kind of untrustworthy in that innocence.
Yeah, Lana Turner has an anger. She's pissed at her.
Oh, she just sneers.
Right, she's pissed at what life has given her. To the extent of, I mean, I think McDormand's Abby's character realizes that she's made choices and that she was happy at one point, but she also realizes what Marty has become.
Yeah, and that she's not happy anymore.
Right, and that she's and so Ray is her. And who knows why? We don't see any of this. Well, who knows why Ray was someone she chose, right?
Well, he likes her. I mean, he says in the car, right? Yeah. I like you. I mean, so kind of dumb luck, right? But I think she probably knows too that she could ask anyone, right? Any kind of man that doesn't look like he's just gonna like beat her. I don't know, but so I think there's that. But I love the ambiguity in this kind of femme fatale figure. It's not vague; it's ambiguous, and that's a good thing in this film. Is that because we're never quite sure about her. I mean,
sure, right?
Dan Hedaya, Marty tells Ray, it's gonna be, what's gonna be funny is when she looks at you and says, I don't know what you're talking about, Ray. I didn't do anything funny. And she says those exact words. And of course, we're meant to remember that and go, maybe there is something going on.
Right.
Because immediately he distrusts her. She distrusts him. I mean, it's like new lover tension. And it just builds into that. And you're just, you're never quite sure. Like, is she on the up and up or not?
I think this film, the way that it's put together is... there's an interesting like dichotomy, because I think there's some things that obviously I don't really think that work, that are just like tricks, and I think that there's some that are just so amazingly confident for a first film. So the example of the Raimi shot of when they're in the the front yard out of Ray's house, and the camera just zooms up in them, that fast zoom that Raimi is so well known for, and that Sonafilm does. They do that again. They do it again, and but to comedic effect in Raising Arizona.
Yeah,
and then Sonnenfeld would do it a ton of times in Men in Black and a bunch of, I mean, he uses it a lot too.
They also do that like kind of low tracking shot on the bar where the camera goes over the guy who's
that was brilliant,
which is so
good. So yeah, the camera's going along a bar. There's a passed out patron on the bar. The camera lifts up and goes over the patron's head, and then goes right back down to the level where it was before.
But that also feels like a Raimi kind of thing.
It does. It does. It does seem kind of like Three Stooges-esque. But the scene where Ray is burying Marty, and it is a 13-minute scene with no dialogue whatsoever, and you just have the radio in the background. I don't know any other first-time filmmaker, aside from one who's just using stock footage and doesn't have enough movie to put anything together. I don't know of any other first-time filmmaker that's going to let 13 minutes go in their movie and without anyone saying anything.
Yeah, that's sort of putting your stamp on something. I mean, that's a confident move, or it's a fuck it, let's see what happens move. But either way, I mean, it takes a lot of nerve, I think, to do that, and a lot of trust in your own ability.
The leap from this, though, to Raising Arizona, this movie, Blood Simple ended up making $3 million. So it made all of its money back for its producers, and I'm sure they all were able to get money back. But it was pretty derided up until the point where it premiered at Toronto. It didn't premiere at Toronto, but it played at Toronto. And the only people that had picked it up at that point were Circle Films. And then when it played at Toronto and it had such a great reception at Toronto, then everyone wanted it again. And Circle was like, yeah, you're not going to get it. We're not going to.
And then it went to Sundance.
And then it went to Sundance, yeah. And then like in 84, 85, it's on everyone's top 10 list, essentially.
Except for Pauline Kael. Pauline Kael called it ugly with crude themes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, of course it was. I mean, that was the point.
I feel like that every episode I have to bring up some kind of negative reaction to a Pauline Kael thing. And I'm sorry.
But I mean, to go from this, which again has its fault, and I think, even they would say that it was not, it's not the film that they're going to, they're going to put on their calling card. But to go to this, to making one of the quintessential comedies of our generation, and quite possibly one of the funniest movies of all time, it's such. And so, like, okay, so here's one of the things that struck me last night about the screening. Was that when I asked prior to the screening how many first timers, a majority of them were first timers. I was going to ask the question, like, do you think that Coen Brothers is greatest hits kind of directorial? Like, I don't know if there's people that go back and I think people like Lebowski. I think people like Raising Arizona. I bet if we'd polled most of the crew, most of them hadn't seen, and I'm not even talking about the deep cuts, like A Simple Man or The Man Who Wasn't There, but like, Blood Simple should be one that people have seen if you are a Coen Brothers fan. I mean, I'm not trying to denigrate moviegoers or movie lovers. That's fine. But it's an interesting thing to me that when you talk about like Scorsese or even like more populist filmmakers like Raimi, for example, there's gonna be people that, oh yeah, I've seen all the Evil Deads, and I went back and looked at. They probably won't have seen Crime Wave because it's fucking hard to find. But I mean, outside of that,
and it's pretty well derided,
right? Yeah, it's a piece of shit. But I mean, like it's. right. But to that end, like it was really, really surprising to me that people hadn't seen this. And it's just like, you like all these, and again, maybe it's because their films are so different. I mean,
Do you think? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No,
where do you think people's entry point is with the Coens? But do you think it's like Lebowski, and then they kind of go, okay?
I think Fargo is the one that probably pulls people in. I think Lebowski's hard for people. I don't think Lebowski. I mean, like, I think it's a cultural zeitgeist.
Well, I think that's what I mean. Because it's become this kind of quotable.
When it came out,
people hated it.
Yeah,
right.
I hated it. I did not like it when I first saw it.
I mean, I thought it was just like, well, I was drunk all the time when it came out.
I wouldn't say hated it, but I was like, I mean, obviously coming off of Fargo and coming off of their Oscar award-winning film, I think people were disappointed with this thing that was different. I don't know where. I mean, like, nowadays, I'm not sure where the entry point is. I definitely think it's probably Lebowski because it's so talked about. Lebowski and Fargo, I would say, was where their sweet spot is. Okay.
So I just wonder, like, then if there's sort of a barrier to going back because of that.
Possibly.
But people are going forward instead. So they start with Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which I feel like is a more accessible kind of film as well. And,
right. And I would, not all of their filmography is accessible. I mean, obviously Barton Fink's not exactly the easiest film to get into.
Right.
So it's Simple Man is not, it's a weird film too. And then you've got the weird, like, you've got the one-offs that are just, not good, like Lady Killers and Intolerable Cruelty. But you also have very popular films like Burn After Reading. I mean, like, you can just go down the list, and even the ones that aren't very good are at least still interesting. I mean, Lady Killers is pretty bad, but like
Tom Hanks doing like Peter Sellers kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of adding a vulgar spin to an Alec Guinness movie where it didn't need it. I mean, like, it was a weird thing for them to do a remake like that when they could have just done something.
And that's just a weird choice to remake.
Right. Yeah, it really is. Like I said, it was like, because you always typically go back to the beginning, right? You find something that you like and you go back and figure out, where they came from. It just seemed Blood Simple to me. It's got a Criterion release. It's not hard to find, and it's not really. It's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy watch. It just seems like it took me by surprise. Let's put it that way.
I mean, it's an hour 40. It's not even that long. I mean, it's not. It's not that. It's under 2 hours, and I think it goes by pretty quick. Actually, I mean, I think it's a pretty lean movie. There's not a ton of fat on it.
No, not at all.
So
I mean, you could argue you could have trimmed up a few places and made it a quick 90.
Sure.
But you would have wanted it to make it, you would have wanted to flesh it out at that time anyway, just so it got, it wasn't looking like an Evil Dead 81.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
right.
Like, to that end, it's really interesting to me too that where the Coens had so much success immediately after this film, and where Raimi kind of languished a bit. Look, his films were still like he had Crime Wave, and that was like a killer for him. And then he goes back to the well and basically remakes Evil Dead,
right,
with Evil Dead 2, and then
with a little bit more money, a little bit more humor.
Right. But I mean, basically makes his first film over again. Yeah. It's and really, Raimi kind of owes a lot to King. I mean, like Stephen King, if Stephen King doesn't say what he says about it's the most scariest film,
right?
I'm not sure that his cult status is I'm not sure where he is at this point.
Because what did Raimi do after? Did he do Army? No, he came back to do Army of Darkness. What?
I can't remember what was in between Evil Dead and was it Darkman?
Was it Darkman?
I'm not sure.
Evil Dead, Crime Wave, Evil Dead 2, Darkman. And then Army of Darkness, Quick and the Dead.
So by the time
by the time he does Simple Plan, he's like, basically the studio's like, here, don't move the camera.
Right.
Here's a simple plan. Don't move the camera. Stop it.
Because Quick and the Dead was fun, but it did not make it. But it also, it was Gene Hackman, Sharon Stone, and early Leonardo DiCaprio, but it did not make any money.
No, and I don't think a lot of people liked it.
Probably not. I kind of
I
there's some cool scenes, and like there's a cool like visual of like showing somebody through a bullet hole.
Russell Crowe too, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot
Russell Crowe. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was an interesting. Like this was '95.
Look, I'm not saying it was a great movie, but it was
no, but it was enjoyable. But I'm with you. I don't think it was great, but I enjoyed it. I dug it. I mean, Sharon Stone was hot at the time. I don't mean that in the derogatory sense.
No,
she was popular at the time. Russell DiCaprio's coming up. Hackman is Hackman, and then you have this newcomer Russell Crowe who's really interesting. I just think it's a sort of a different take on this kind of Western, on this kind of sadistic sort of Western.
It's a Raimi take on Westerns, right? Yeah. It's a fantastical take on this genre.
Yeah. And it's 95 and I'm a senior in high school, so it's got guns and boobs. I'm cool. Yeah, let's do it, right?
Right. So can we talk a little bit about the Fort Worth inspiration?
Go for it.
One of the inspirations, and it was, it was the Coens, and the reason it's kind of set in Texas is that the Coens had read about this Fort Worth case of Fort Worth case of murder, and it was a pretty high profile trial. At the time when the man went on trial, he was the wealthiest man in America to have been put on trial for murder. It's very much like Devil's Advocate, kind of, that. Have you ever seen Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves?
Yeah.
The trial in Devil's Advocate is very much like that.
Right. Okay. all I could think of is like, look, but don't touch. Touch, but don't taste.
He's an absentee landlord.
Taste, but don't swallow.
So, back in 1960s Fort Worth, there was an oil baron family that's called the Davises, and the patriarch of that family was a man whose nickname was Stinky Davis, who had 3 sons. I think T. Cullen Davis was the middle son, but it doesn't really matter. T. Cullen was this socialite, obviously rich kid in Fort Worth, and he was, at the time that this all happened, he was married and to another woman, and he goes to this country club, the Ridgely Country Club, if you're familiar with Fort Worth. He goes to the Ridgely Country Club. He's paying doubles with this couple, and the wife of the other person he's playing doubles with is a woman named Priscilla. Flamboyant, exciting. So both of these people that are playing, they both get divorced. They get caught up in these big, high-profile divorce cases, and eventually what happens is they break up. Priscilla, throughout the course of this, because she was with T. Cullen, she ends up losing custody of her kids. But so they get together. Now Stinky didn't like Priscilla. And so, because she was kind of ostentatious and she came from poor upbringing and she wasn't, of the cloth that the Davises should be a part of. So Cullen and Priscilla are dating mere hours after Stinky passes away and T. Cullen inherits $100 million, which in today's money is $480 million. Hours after he passes away, T. Cullen and Priscilla get married. Once T. Cullen gets all of this money, he goes off on a spending spree buying art. He builds this huge mansion called the Stonegate Mansion. It's now used as like an event center in Fort Worth, but it was like this huge, looked like a municipal building. The master bedroom was 2,000 square feet kind of thing. And he's filling this with all kinds of art and just decadence, right? He's Fort Worth Trump at this point.
This world is not fair.
It's really, really not. And so Priscilla is living this life up, and she gets involved. And so basically, like he's kind of T. Cullen is seen as like before this was seen as kind of a spendthrift. He would charge his buddies 25 cents to ride in his car when they were at Texas A&M kind of thing. But once this all happens, now that he's married to Priscilla, in this Stonegate Mansion, they're just having drug-fueled, coke-fueled orgies all the time, and of course these things don't last. So 5 years later, they start to get, and Cullen is a royal piece of shit. He's abusive. You can go off and read it. So I don't want to give all the horrific details of it, but he's extremely abusive to her, and I don't want to go into it. But there's an incident with the cat of one of his stepdaughters. So these high-profile, wealthy marriages that are based on coke and sex they end up splitting up, and also because of the abuse. And so they break up, and the judge basically orders T. Cullen out of Stonegate Mansion. And so he leaves Stonegate Mansion. He has to pay his wife alimony. She moves in with a boyfriend. And so this is where all this cart's coming from, right? She moves in with a boyfriend who's a 6'10", former TCU basketball player, just a big stud of a guy and T. Cullen has all of these financial problems at this point. He's still got money, but because it's all of his money's tied up in divorce settlements, he can't do business deals. Him and his brothers can't do business deals without the court's permission. It's all this, crap. On the day that the judge increases Priscilla's alimony for the third time, someone breaks into Stonegate Mansion and kills her daughter, which is T. Cullen's stepdaughter, shoots her boyfriend, and eventually kills him and tries to kill Priscilla. Now, she's able to get away and run out, and she meets two friends. Well, she's able to get away to a neighboring house. On the way up, as she's being chased, two of her friends who come up and see T. Cullen. He's dressed all in black, has a black woman's wig on, but they clearly identify him as the shooter. So he's arrested hours later. So the trial starts. He hires 3 lawyers. One of them who had represented a man, a famous plastic surgeon in Houston who had denied his wife medical treatment, and she ended up dying. One of them who had defended Kirby, and then this guy named Richard Racehorse Haynes. So the first trial in Fort Worth gets
that guy's a mob lawyer. Oh, I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I mean,
he goes by the name Racehorse, right? So the first trial in Fort Worth goes to a mistrial. So they get the trial moved to Amarillo, and at that point, it's a 13-week murder trial. And Priscilla, for some reason, who's known in these circles in Fort Worth as she runs with drug dealers, and she's a party. She shows up in this little house in a prairie dress with a full-on cross and a Bible in her hand, and Racehorse has a field day. Now, to T. Cullen's credit,
does he lap the field?
he absolutely does. So there was no physical evidence of the murders. So no weapon was found. Cullen's fingerprints aren't anywhere. They just have the 3 eyewitnesses. And essentially what happens is that Racehorse eviscerates Priscilla. Now, Priscilla plays the cards wrong, and she comes in a little house in the prairie. He basically paints her up as a coke-filled whore, and that who conspired with her 2 friends because she wanted Cullen out of the way to have all of his money. And so for 13 weeks, and basically people said as soon as he was done cross-examining Priscilla, the trial was over. But he says in his memoirs, or in one of it's like a Texas Monthly article, he says, I kept the trial going for as long as I could so I could make sure that every single juror had reasonable doubt. By the time the trial's over and T. Cullen is acquitted of all of this, he's seen as a Fort Worth hero. And Priscilla's just when they talk about her, it's just these snide remarks, and it's crazy. So Flash forward 2 years later, and I haven't read all about this trial, but like T. Cullen is arrested again for conspiracy to commit murder because the FBI has him on tape hiring a person to kill the judge that's overseeing his divorce trial, as well as Priscilla. Basically, on tape, they have him on tape. Is saying to the person he's hired to kill these people. It's like you want to. He's like, I killed that judge for you. T. Cullen says, good. He's like, there's other people you want. You want a lot of people killed, right? And he's like, yeah. And but that wasn't enough to so Racehorse comes back in again and says, hey. Yeah, we say shit all the time, man. I say stuff. You say, yeah, I'm glad that guy's dead. Of course he's going to be glad he's dead. Yeah, and of course he wanted all these people dead. That's not proof. That's not proof.
You see how this ties back into Tar?
Yeah, absolutely. So that ended up in a mistrial, a hung jury. They couldn't convict him. When they arrested him the first time for murder, they asked him why he did it, and he said, sometimes a man don't need no reasons. They were able to throw that confession out because he hadn't been Mirandized yet. So
this is why all this shit matters.
And so years later, Priscilla dies of breast cancer in 2001, going to her grave still, and obviously this guy did this. T. Cullen would end up being a reformed, born again Christian. End up losing all of his money in the 1980s oil recession, declared bankruptcy. He still lives in Fort Worth today. So, hey, T. Cullen, if you're out there and you want to come defend yourself on Why Does the Wilhelm Scream, please do. We're over here every Thursday. You can find Brock Kingsley at whyBrockSometimes.com.
That is he can come on and give us this sort of like OJ bullshit. I mean, and we'll call it
how I did it if I was going to do it.
If I did it episode, if I did it special episode, that's bonkers.
It's so 80s Texas. There's a criminal a Criminal Minds wiki page that like lists out real trials. So when I'm sitting there reading about this, and like I was doing the intro for the movie last night, and I'm talking to my wife and Kat about this, and I'm like they've made this into like a TV movie, and like a couple of like TV shows have referenced it. They've written a book, but I'm like, how is this trial not made into a full blown movie? Like it just like how have they not done this in a like it's just so crazy.
And I've lived here for 10 years now. This is the first time I've heard it. I've never heard about this story, and it's fucking wild. But yeah, I'm just thinking that sounds like Texas.
It sounds like Texas.
Where am I?
It's Chinatown, Jake. Sorry, Priscilla. And there's some great and T. Cullen was a pretty handsome guy when he was younger. Priscilla was gorgeous. And you see pictures of her and that she's just decked out in like really like Club 54 kind of like just like long dresses and just beautiful. And it's like what a fucking life that must be, where you're just like living life to the ridiculous excesses, right? Just
at like the pedals all the way down all the time.
You're dusting your cornflakes with cocaine kind of like lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, not to be too like personal and sort of like pulling back the curtain on myself, but I've had at points in my life in the past, and thank goodness no longer, where I have stayed up for 3 days straight with some help. It's terrible. It is terrible. It takes you like a month to recover. Like I can't imagine being able to do that with no kind of worry about the next day, like night after night after night.
Yeah, that kind of Jordan
I still had to go to work.
Kind of like, yeah. right. Yeah. Now's the time, and then Why Does the Wilhelm Scream when we do recommend it if you like. Like the thing that we talked about before, you might actually like these other things we're going to talk about now. I was trying to come up with a theme song for this, but it's not going well so far. I'm gonna give it to you. You
okay.
Start.
All right. So I'm gonna go first, and I'm gonna do a cheat on this one. Sure. So I'm gonna give you two, and the first one is.
We're going to do three altogether. You're going to give me four? Is that what you're going to do? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, because these two kind of... there's one real recommendation.
I have a feeling that we might actually step on each other's toes.
Have some crossover here. Okay, so here's the first one, and this is the real kind of recommended, if you like, and that is The Postman Always Rings Twice from 1946, starring the aforementioned Lana Turner. and John Garfield. A married woman and a drifter fall in love and then plot the murder of her husband. It's a quintessential film noir. And I think you can see its influence kind of all over Blood Simple. I mean,
absolutely.
Very,
From
very
like
similar.
small town, like the diner/bar setting.
Older husband.
A lot of car scenes and a lot of misdirection too. And
Yeah. Plot twists and stuff on top of a basic simple plot. So this is based off of a James M. Cain novel, right, that was then remade in the 80s with Jessica Lange and Jack Nicholson. I studied with a short story writer named Lee K. Abbott at Ohio State. And he would always quote a line from this novel. So the novel is told in a first-person narration by Garfield's character, Frank Chambers. And there's this line, Abbott would always quote this line when talking about how we show character, right, on the page. And Chambers, when he first sees the Lana Turner character, says, "She looks so good, it made me want to hit her with a hammer." It's a fucking brilliant line that just tells you everything, right, about this guy. Now, maybe it's not the best line ever, but yeah.
No, and it's one that would be derided now. I mean, but it's so like there's something to that where you see something so beautiful that you just can't stand it and you
just have to smash it.
Right.
You just have to destroy it because it's too it's too painful to look at. I can't. That's it. And it also shows that this guy can be violent, and this is how he appreciates beauty, right? In a violent, destructive way.
Right. The scene when Turner is first see her
with the
in that
lipstick?
movie. Yeah, the lipstick that falls on the floor, but you pan up to her face, and she's shot in all this soft light. She's in total white. She's in this like kind of half shirt with just a little bit of and like legs that go on for days.
Till Tuesday.
It is such an iconic shot, and it's so good, and it's just meant to be like you're in this. You're obviously looking through Frank's eyes,
right,
and seeing her for the first time. It's really, really good.
Yeah. So I think that you would all like that film. Okay, so here's my cheat, and it's A Woman, a Gun, and a Noodle Shop,
which is the remake,
which is
the
like
Chinese
the direct remake, but set in, I don't know if it's like the Qing Dynasty, but some pre quote unquote modern like China. So, but it really is a real close remake with some slapstick. But it I don't think it's a great film, but it's an interesting artifact to kind of put up against. So that was my cheat. I just wanted to.
Fair enough. I the Postman's on my list. I've got 4 just in case I knew we would do this. So
yeah, I don't think you'll have the other 2. So
I don't think you'll have. Well, maybe. I know you won't have 2 of mine, but and they'll actually now we say this. They'll all be the same.
I know, right? That was pretty hipster of you. Like, have you heard of this? Probably not.
No. It's not that you haven't heard of them.
I'm kidding. All right, go.
No. But going back to the Postman over twice.
Yeah.
I do think I think Hugh Cronyn's character, and that's great, and that kind of speaks to like the huckster lawyer. The scene where he's like he like tricks Lana Turner into confessing the murder of her husband, and of course both of these characters, in order to make them likable, they have these crises of conscience right as they're trying to murder him and like bring him back and then live this miserable life together. His character is Hugh Cronyn's character, where he gets her to confess her portion in the murder, and to a fake, to a fake court person, and then or to a fake cop, and then so she gets it out of her system, and then he gets her off. And I will say I think the Postman always goes a little too long. I don't think it's a great film. I think it's good. And I really love it. Once it comes back around to the ultimate, like, fuck you of all the characters, It's a lot of fun. I think it needs a little bit of trimming, Have
you noticed that most of the film noir, the stuff that we associate with film noir, especially from the 40s and 50s, they're not really great.
No,
they're just a lot of fun.
They were just, just potboiler films.
Oh, yeah. And they all sort of followed that's the same kind of formula, but they were just a lot of fun.
I mean, there were a handful, like, Stranger on a Train, Double Indemnity. I mean, those that are really, truly, like, classics, right?
I think The Big Sleep is one. I'm a huge fan of that. I have no idea what is actually going on in that movie, but it's one of my favorites.
But all of these, like, I'm a huge sucker for the rat-a-tat-tat dialogue. I'm a huge sucker for, like, just the double cross and And so there are some that stand out, but even like the chafe is still like really good.
Yeah. But and these are the kind of films that really got me into movies. I mean, because when I was 10, 11, 12, 13. And I was reading like the Godfather novel.
Right.
And then I'm like, what's Turner Classic Movie? What's this? This is in that black and white movies. Oh, and of course that led me then to French New Wave stuff, because you see the influence of film noir on French New Wave, right? And then you see the German Expressionist influence on film noir. And so, that's the stuff that led me into some of these other films. Anyway.
So when you watched The Godfather, you're just kind of wondering when they were going to show Sonny's dick like the entire time, since you'd read the book.
Oh, I just fast forwarded, yeah.
Well, they never showed it. But
in Apollonia's breast,
right?
Because they write that, yeah.
Have you ever read Jaws, Peter Benchley's Jaws? Look, obviously Spielberg flipped that and did, but I read that way too young, and I was, because like my parents were like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, good you're reading. It's Jaws. Like, I've seen the movie. There's this whole subplot in the movie where Brody's wife sleeps with Richard Dreyfuss's character, and it's very, very explicit. He like goes to a diner and she talks about taking her underwear off in the bathroom and him like exploring her in the car like on the way out. But yeah, there's a whole subplot where that Spielberg rightfully probably took out of the movie. Ellen Brody definitely
not that kind of character in the film. No. So they did a little night putting.
So my first that's why I get kicked out. My first recommended, if you like, is John Dahl's The Last Seduction with Linda Fiorentino, Bill Pullman, and Peter Berg, who Peter Berg's now a director. But it is about this was when in the early to mid 90s when people were trying to make Linda Fiorentino thing. And that's not to denigrate. I think she's a great actress. I think she's a lot of fun, and she has that kind kind of like sexy,
really
sultry.
pushing.
But yeah, this was, and you'll find this in occasion. I meant to mention this when you talked about 8mm. The other episode, like Norman Reedus was a guy that they were really, like he was on Entertainment Weekly as like the next one to watch for, and then he doesn't do anything really until Walking Dead really breaks out.
Right.
But there was a time when
that was after Boondock Saints.
It would have been before.
Or was it before? Okay,
because Boondock Saints
I forget.
92, something like that. But yeah, I mean, but he never had the huge mainstream breakout that people thought he was going to have until he did, and until he did Walking Dead. Linda Fiorentino was the same way. She did, and then she ended up, making Jade, and that essentially was kind of a death knell for her career, for everybody's Caruso's career as well. Linda Fiorentino she's a New York telemarketer. She's hawking these like what appears to be some sort of prescription drugs, and she's just a high pressure salesperson. She takes those drugs with. Have you ever seen Last Seduction? It's been years.
Yeah.
She's married to Bill Pullman, who's kind of a volatile, kind of con man. They steal these drugs from this place that she's selling them. He goes off and they make this huge deal. And essentially when they come back and they meet after the drug deal's over, and Pullman gets the money, which he thinks at that time that it happened, he's about to get murdered. It doesn't happen. And he comes back. For some reason, he slaps Linda Fiorentino, and she gets pissed and takes the money and run. And so during this whole entire time, she is, she's changed her name. She's in a new town, and she's worried that Bill Pullman is trying to basically find her to get his money back. And she's working the angles with J.T. Walsh, that's her lawyer, in how long do I have to keep this money, and where I can then declare it's actually mine. And so she's trying to figure out how she can divorce him, and then still not have to give him back any of the money. And he's like, and so all these machinations. Well, she meets up with a small town boob, in Peter Berg, who wants to be a bigger guy than what he is in this little town. And then she just starts to play him for a fiddle. And ultimately she gets Peter Berg to kill Bill Pullman, or actually she sets up Peter Berg for Bill Pullman's death, where she murdered him actually. And Peter Berg's left in a jail cell wondering what the hell happened. He was just blindsided by beauty. This was a series of films for John Dahl that he wrote and directed. He would go on to make Red Rock West right after this with Nicolas Cage
and Laura Dern.
Who was the other that was like Laura Dern? You know the one I'm talking about, the not Laura Dern. She dated. She was in Men in Black 2. She dated Jack Nicholson for a while. Laura Flynn Boyle. So the other Laura of the 90s.
What's the movie? I know, but right, Dennis Hopper was in that. Was in Red Rock West.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the And I know I'm kicking myself. What's the Lynch movie with Laura Dern and
Wild at Heart?
Thank you.
And Nicolas Cage, yeah. And so, and then Dahl would do these 3 movies and then really just go, and like he's had a prolific career in television, but like he was kind of what it seemed to be ready to be the next kind of like guy who was taking on this mantle of being a film noir kind of heavy thriller, especially when the 90s were coming out and there was a lot of those movies that were coming out.
Well, he did Rounders.
And he did Rounders, yeah. And after that was basically it for him. Yeah. Which is weird because I had to imagine that was relatively successsul. I have no idea what kind of money that movie made, but
right. I mean,
it was well received, and it kind of kicked off the whole Texas Hold'em craze. So
yeah. Okay.
All right, what's your number 3?
Something Wild.
Asshole. All right.
Something Wild. 1986, directed by Jonathan Demme, starring Jeff Daniels and Melanie Griffith. Melanie Griffith plays a free-spirited woman who, quote-unquote, kidnaps Jeff Daniels for a weekend of adventure. But things get scary and dangerous when her ex-husband, or ex-con husband, shows up, played by Ray Liotta.
A great role by Ray Liotta.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's just a fun movie. I mean, it's great.
Yeah,
I love it. I don't know what to...
Demme's always fun, especially like freewheeling Demme, like where funny Demme is. Yeah, it's always good.
And it's just so batshit crazy. It's great.
Yeah,
it's great. I don't know. There's nothing else I really have to say about it except that it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, go and watch it for sure. Have you ever seen Smile, the Bruce Dern film? It's the very first appearance of Melanie Griffith, and it's about this like small town, a pageant, and she's like, and she's is topless, which is very uncomfortable because she's very, very young.
Well, I mean, she's one of these stars who, from a very young age, was like hypersexualized,
right?
And her, and I mean even Jodie Foster, and I'm sure I'm forgetting others, but I haven't.
Most of them, yeah.
Most of them, right? Who was Melanie Griffith married to for a long time?
Don Johnson.
That's right.
And
wasn't she a minor when? That's right.
Yeah.
Dakota Johnson.
Yes.
That's what I was.
Yes. Yeah. She was a minor when they got together. Yeah. Don Johnson's got a history of that.
But hey, it was the 80s or whatever. It's fine.
It was fine.
I'm kidding. It's not fine. Don't. Yeah. Okay. What's your second one?
My second one is Diabolique, the Clouzot 1955.
Okay, I was going to ask.
Not the fucking Chaz Palminteri remake with Sharon Stone. A great French noir thriller. It is about a asshole-ish headmaster at this student at this school for boys. He is terrible to his students. He's terrible to his wife. He's terrible to his mistress. His wife and his mistress conspire together to kill him by drowning him in a bathtub after they have, they've sedated him, and they're going to put him in a rundown pool on the school grounds, and they are hoping that it looks like they're trying to frame it as an accident, but So they push his body down to the bottom of the pool, expecting it to rise back up. It never rises back up. They freak out and run away. And then things start to go really awry for them. The man's suit comes back from the dry cleaners with a key from his hotel. There's a detective that's involved that's kind of playing them for fiddles as well, but also kind of seems buffoonish. It's just a great, like, oh shit, what am I really seeing? What's really true? It's so much fun. It's so good.
It's got a kind of Gaslight vibe too.
Yeah.
In that, because I mean, well, I don't think we should spoil that one.
No. I don't think so. Yeah, it has one of the great like reveal endings
really good
of all
twists.
Time.
And yeah. It's such a cool one. Okay, my third one is Gloria. John Cassavetes' 1980 film, starring the great Gina Rollins.
Not the Sharon Stone remake.
Correct. Not the Sharon Stone remake. I like how you looked at me like, wait.
What's another Sharon Stone remake? Yeah, that's weird. I didn't think about that, but yeah. I was like, I just shitted on Chaz Palminteri for some reason.
Well, Gloria is the neighbor of this family. So the father of this family is like an accountant for the mob and has said some things he shouldn't have said, and he's written everything down, and so the mob is going to kill him. Gloria comes over to the apartment to get some coffee, right? She forgot she's out of coffee, and they're like, hey, take our kids. The boy goes with her. The kind of preteen daughter stays. So this family gets murdered by the mob, and Gloria becomes this reluctant caregiver, reluctant guardian of this like 6, 7-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And it turns out Gloria is a former mob mistress and knows the guys that are after this kid. And she basically kicks ass. And she's another woman with a gun, like Abby in Blood Simple, kind of. And it's got this...
But she's so badass, though.
She is so badass. She does not... she's not phased at all. I mean, what phases her is that she has to take care of this kid.
Right.
And by the end of it, she sort of comes to terms with that and is willing to sacrifice herself in a way to make sure this kid's okay. And then plays, her or his grandmother by the end of it.
Right.
Which is something she also is like, I don't want grandkids. She's like 50 at the time.
Right.
It's one of those New York movies because it's like taking place like in the Bronx, I think, for the most part, and then they kind of go into Manhattan and stuff. But it's a real New York movie where shit just happens on the street and nobody seems to care.
Do you think Cassavetes gets the respect he deserves?
I love Cassavetes.
Yeah, it's so good.
I love Cassavetes.
Yeah. I think within like film nerd and critic, so I mean, like obviously in the film, like the filmmakers that are around today, obviously will use him as an influence. But I mean,
in popular culture, I don't think so.
Right,
I really don't. I think it's interesting that one of the best Cassavetes movies was made by Elaine May.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Mikey and Nicky is such a Cassavetes movie. I mean, I know that he's in it, but
right.
But I mean, Husbands is just. I think he's fantastic, and no, I don't think he gets nearly enough credit. And I think some of his acting roles were really interesting too. Rosemary's Baby and The Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, Elaine May. I know she had a reputation for being difficult, and of course that's what women didn't that have power back then.
Right.
I really love her stuff, and it's so unfortunate that like Ishtar just completely killed her career.
But again, that's Warren Beatty. That's what Warren Beatty does, right? If he can't direct the film that he's not directing, then he kind of torpedoes it.
And I think Ishtar's had a weird like re-imaging. But it's still not a good movie. I watched it. I screened it at the At Home Film Fest, and just of these movies that were kind of like notorious. We had a whole like series of notorious films. It's not good. But it's a lot more fun than people. I think people shut on it immediately when it came out because it's
the worst movie ever.
Well, it went over budget and it just sounded stupid.
Right.
It's not great. Hoffman's not really good, but it's fun to see those guys. I don't know. I don't know. It's fun. Like by the time it ends up, I think it's not nearly. It's a definite like 5.5, 6. It's not like it's anything terrible.
Elaine May and Cassavetes should get more, I think, credit than they do. So.
Absolutely. All right, my last one is 1993's Dream Lover. I'm pretty sure you probably haven't heard of this. It was directed and written by Nicholas Kazan, who was the son of Elia Kazan. This is a James Spader 1993 sex thriller kind of movie with Machen Amick. And so it is hot. If you go and watch it, folks, watch the unrated version. There is a lot of like good stuff in there. If you like sexy movies. But basically, James Spader plays this recently divorced guy who meets this kind of whirlwind beauty and kind of comes in and takes over his life, and they end up getting married. Well, as soon as they start getting married, he starts to realize that all of her stories don't quite add up, and that where she's almost tempting him to find out things about her, where she may still be married, she may not come from the place where she said she came from, she may still be married to a hometown sweetheart. She may be having an affair with one of his friends. The kids that they have together may not be his kids. And basically, she sets him up and to essentially go crazy, and she eventually has him committed to an insane asylum. It is as far as like the tawdry, like kind of movies of the 90s go, this is one of the better ones. It definitely keeps you guessing. There's some things that are kind of annoying. Annoying in it, like some just filmmaker choices, but like of the movies that like Spader's perfect for this role. He's so like that level of Spader where he has this air of like pretentiousness, but also like almost like a weird level of intelligence, but he can't like quite control it. It's so, I don't know. I really like that era of, obviously I know you can become a little much, but I like that era of Spader.
He was so good and I mean really attractive in a different way. He was pretty back then, I think, and fits well for those kind of erotic thrillers that that we saw in a different way than like Michael Douglas, who became like the smarmy star of erotic thrillers, right?
Right. It has supporting cast of Larry Miller, who is wonderful in everything that he does.
Everything.
And it's so funny. And I mean, if you're not familiar with Larry Miller, he's kind of a stalwart of the Spinal Tap crew and all of those movies in Mighty Wind.
And he's that guy. I mean, people will see him go like, oh yeah, that guy. I know that guy.
He played the daughter's dad in 10 Things I Hate About You, which is probably one of his. And he was in Nutty Professor. He was the foil for Eddie Murphy in Nutty Professor. Kazan wouldn't ever direct anything else after this. He would go off and he would still write movies. In fact, he wrote Reversal of Fortune in a movie that I really love called Fallen, which is a Denzel Washington film. But yeah, he would never direct anything after this. And he didn't direct. He directed one TV show before this. So, but yeah, a lot of fun. And again, a lot of sexy moments with Mädchen Amick and James Spader, which is why in '93 I was watching it a lot.
Yes. On repeat and pause.
Right.
Great. So yeah, go check those films out if you like Blood Simple. I think these will give you something different to think about. And there's a different kind of a relation and association to it. Yeah,
and there's a ton. I mean, obviously there's a ton, but I think this will give you a good idea, especially if you go back to those earlier ones, you'll get to see a lot of the influences of what they were doing. I don't really think the Coens are too overly concerned about who they're influencing these days. But I do think that they are probably encyclopedic auteurs.
Yeah, I mean, so much is homage, right? I mean, with their own spin and their own kind of representation. So coming up, we will have a Christmas show, maybe a Christmas grab bag kind of special episode, looking at a variety of films from Christmas in Handcuffs.
We're watching Christmas in Handcuffs. We're watching Falling for Christmas. We're watching Black Christmas. We're watching Die Hard.
Yes.
And we're watching a French Christmas horror thriller called Deadly Games or Code Noel. There's a bunch of different names for it. It's a lot of fun.
Excellent.
So those 5. Are we going to watch the Flaming Lips one as well, or is that?
That was more just for you.
Okay.
I have that with me. I'll give that to you before we go. That was more just for you.
All right. So those 5 we're definitely watching.
The Christmas from Mars, Christmas on Mars has like marching vaginas, and it's just it's brilliant and it's weird, but no.
So if you want to, obviously, some of those you've probably seen. You've probably seen Die Hard. Falling for Christmas is on Netflix. It's the new Lindsay Lohan. Go out and seek out Holiday in Handcuffs so we can talk about that one. There's a How Did This Get Made about Holiday in Handcuffs. It stars Mario Lopez and Melissa Joan Hart. I actually screened it a couple of Christmases ago on the Real House Foundation as well. So much fun. And then, Code Noel maybe I think that's on Shudder. So if you wanted to watch that one, that one's on Shudder. But yeah, it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, so go out and listen to or watch those, and then play along when we talk about them. We will also be returning with a third installment of our Schrader series, where we will be looking at the screenplays that he wrote but did not direct. So we'll be looking at Taxi Driver, Bringing Out the Dead, so 2 Scorsese films, and then Mosquito Coast, if you're good with that. The Peter Weir Weir film on the Paul Theroux novel.
I think about you when I pee. Let's not use that as the outro for the podcast.
Well, I'm definitely going to use it now. Thanks for listening, everyone.
I thought you were going to use, I'm an absentee landlord. That's not even a good Pacino. I didn't even wasn't even trying. And he's not the absentee landlord. God is. God is the absentee landlord. If that's the message that we're giving away here today, tar blows and God is an absentee landlord.
Also go back and listen to our episode on First Reform to hear how we feel about religion. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Everybody.
Merry Christmas. Bye.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.